Hi guys, welcome to Futro Stories. I am Tatiana, Jordan's wife, taking over to host this special episode where we're going to learn some mission stories from Jordan. He served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we're not sponsored by that church or endorsed by
That
it.
church? You mean our church?
Just giving my disclaimer, not eloquently. So Jordan, why don't you start us off and tell us one of your favorite stories? Oh wait, tell us where you served and what language you spoke.
So I spoke Argentine. So I served my mission in Argentina, Buenos Aires, Norte, and then I spoke, well, it's Spanish, but they say Castellano, which is like a form of Spanish. It's like an Italian, or I don't know if it's more French. No, Italian have those little hats with the little side swoosh thing, right? Is that a French hat?
That's like, I think you're speaking about French. Talking about French hats.
Okay, so it's an accent, because if you speak like this...
Oh, then that's Italian.
Okay, that's Italian, yeah.
I didn't know that. So wait, are some of the words Italian-ish, or are they all Spanish words, just the accent is different?
Yeah, it's just because they have it's like their skin is more fair than it would be dark, if that makes sense. So like in Mexico, maybe their skin would be a tiny bit darker than Argentines. Like some people couldn't even tell the difference between, not quite American, but it's very light-skinned.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, like, I mean, I stood out because I don't know why they called me Rubio, which means blondie, but I had blue eyes, so they would call me Rubio.
Oh, that's funny.
Because they knew right away, oh, this is a Yankee, which means a Yankee, which is an American.
So many words.
Yeah, I know. Well, in Mexico, for example, they would call people gringos.
Oh, right.
But in Argentina, they would say, oh, that's un Yankee, which means Yankee. And it's because they say ja instead of ya. So if something like a napkin is servilleta in Spanish, but in Argentina, it's servilleta. So I spent all that time in the MTC trying to learn, like, I was so proud when I learned the word servilleta, and it turns out it was servilleta. So literally, like, the one word I learned in the MTC, like, didn't translate, so...
That's so funny. I also have a story about the word for napkin, which is very similar in French, serviette, in the MTC. It was stupid. We were just at the dinner table, and one of the elders was like, in French, asked me if I could pass the napkin, and so he was just like, I just remember it was serviette, was part of it.
Yeah.
And I just didn't respond for quite a few seconds. And then I realized, oh, you're talking to me and you're asking me to pass you the napkin. I was just really delayed in my understanding of French. And he had a really thick American accent. Anyways, but so the accent, it sounds like, was different, but were the words different too? Like, were any of the...
Yes. So words like, if you said piña, which means pineapple in Mexico, down in Argentina, if you said te doy una piña, it means like, I'm going to punch you in the face. So
different meanings.
Very different. And there's bad words I keep saying Mexico, but anywhere, I guess, down in South America, that would mean something different, like bad words, all sorts of different words that would actually not even be bad words for them in Argentina.
Interesting. Well, that's kind of like the British and the Americans.
Oh, good point.
bloody.
Whoa.
I'm sorry. We have to bleep that out. It's just like, it's not a bad word in America at all. Anyways, okay, moving on. Jordan, why don't you tell us one of your favorite stories from this mission?
Yeah, so one of my favorite stories would have to be, oh man, it's hard to just sum it down to one, but I'll try to settle for one of them. Going back to an area that I had served in. I mean, it's so funny because, like, with the different topics, I feel like this has a little bit of all of them. So I wasn't sure which one to put it under. Like, I guess this could be my favorite, but also, like, not to say it was my worst too, but there was like moments from this story that I didn't love. Like, so one of my most dangerous areas that I served in, I mean, I got robbed the most, and just like, I guess there's like 3 different types of people when you get robbed. It's like fight, flight, or freeze, and I'm the freezing type of person. I had served there at the beginning of my mission, and then my mission president, the very end of my mission, I was in a very safe area, very nice area, and I was like, oh, this is a good way to end my mission. And then I get a call a week into that transfer, which is my last transfer, and my mission president says, I'm sending you back to San Ignacio. And I'm like, oh no. Because I'm like, that was my most dangerous area. And I was just like, I'm not going to be able to make it. But when I got there the first night, like, all the people were very welcoming, and I got to see some of my converts, and I was super happy. But then on my bike ride home, a guy comes running out of the dark with a shotgun, and he just, I thought he was like, he wasn't yelling, give me your money. He was just yelling, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. So I just thought, I was slowing down on my bike, and I thought, this is how I die. Because I was like, I don't remember anything in my patriarchal blessing saying anything beyond my mission. So I was like, this is it. This is how I go. And my companion started screaming, run. And so corre, which means run. So I guess he was just saying run, like ride faster. And we did. I'm not sure he even understood, because it was only his second transfer. So I don't think he was kind of aware of what was going on. I don't think he realized the guy was yelling, I'm going to kill you in the dark. And the guy also had the shotgun wrapped up in a blanket. I don't know if I mentioned that. So you couldn't really tell if it was an actual gun. A lot of people would just put their hands under their shirt, and then they would like poke their fingers through, like saying, I've got a gun. But you never knew, and it's not worth taking the risk, you know? So I started slowing down, like, this is the end. But my companion yelled, run, and so I did, and we took off, because I started to freeze, like, as that happened, because that's just how I am. Every time it happens, I can't move my body, like, I physically could not move. But sorry, that's not my favorite story, but just being back in that area, the reason that's important is because a year ago, when I was serving with another companion, we had taught this woman, I'm trying to remember her name, but she was living with this guy, and missionaries had been coming around for a long time, kind of on and off, trying to get them. And she had been to church so many times. And so I had asked my companion as we were walking, so I was back in this area a year later, and the problem is, so in Argentina, a lot of investigators or just people in Argentina, they get married very young, and then they get separated from that person, and they would just never get remarried because it was too much money, or it was too much of a hassle, lots of paperwork and things. And so they just decided to live with the new person. And so getting them to do that paperwork and stuff, there's a lot of lazy people in Argentina. And so it's just like, oh, it's too much work, it's too much money and time. I just don't have that dedication to it. And so that was the reason she wouldn't get married to this guy. And I was with my new companion back in my old area, and he's kind of a greenie, so he didn't really know a whole lot was going on. He just knew little details. And so I asked him, I said, like, oh, hey, how about this lady? We taught her a long time ago. I was feeling like we should go teach her. And he's like, oh, my companion told me that she's completely crazy and out of her mind, which she was kind of quirky. Like, if you saw a photo of her, her hair is just like she looks like she's kind of crazy.
Love it.
And I'm like, well, let's just go see her, you know. I didn't think she'd recognize me, which I don't think she did. But when we went back and we started talking to her, I noticed it was just her there. And I'm like, oh, maybe he's out at work. And so I was talking to her, and I'm like, what happened to, sorry, I'm forgetting his name, but I said, what happened to your boyfriend? And she's like, oh, so he was riding home from work, and he got in a motorcycle accident, and he died. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I had this impression to teach her the second lesson, which is the plan of salvation, not the first lesson. Usually we always teach the first lesson, but I had this feeling to teach the second. So I taught it. And by the end of the lesson, she's like, so you're saying if I get baptized, I can do baptisms for my mother? And I was like, oh. And that was a quick lesson from the Spirit. Like, you don't know what, I mean, only God knows what these people need. And you don't know the reasons behind that. Like, there's just so much to people, and I just kind of oversimplify things, thinking, oh, it's because he died, she wanted to, do baptisms for the dead for that person. Turns out she wanted to do it for her mother. And I'm like, yeah, you can do baptisms for the dead in the temple with your mom. And so she's like, then I'll get baptized. And so I think that same week we baptized her, because she had been through all the lessons with all the missionaries previous to that. She had been well prepared. She just hadn't gone back to church because, it had just been a while since the missionaries had talked to her. And yeah, I had no idea why the missionary before didn't. I guess, obviously the Spirit was there to teach her why she needed to be going to church. So yeah, we baptized her the next week, and she was one of my favorite converts. She was kind of crazy, but love her to death. And that was one of my favorite stories, just because of, clearly my mission president was inspired to send me back to the area for so many reasons. There's so many people I met in that last transfer, and it was turned into one of my favorite areas. Funny last part about that, though, is they actually broke that area in half because it was growing so much, and it was like right before they changed the age, because I got home right before that, so the younger kids could go. And so girls started, more girls went after that. But there was this like huge like spike in missionaries like while I was there. So they split our area in half and gave the safer area, of course, to the girls and the worse area to us. And then every Sunday we pass around the schedule. And of course, because there were sisters in the ward, everybody was like, "Oh, beautiful sisters," and so they filled their schedule like to the rim
Like
for dinner for lunches because we only did lunches. But I think even people wrote in dinners for them and lunches, and ours we'd pass it around and we'd have like one or two for that whole week. So people, even my own convert, and I gave him crap for that, but he even signed up multiple times with the sister missionaries, and I was so upset about that. So that was definitely one of my favorite stories. There's many, but. And like I said, it has little parts of everything. Like, obviously, I don't love getting robbed, so that's part of not my favorite. But what I do love is that, like, in that entire story, it's like God has, he essentially sees all things and we don't. And he has a plan for everyone. And I saw that through that story. And it was such a miracle and a blessing that I was able to experience that and be a part in, like, his hands. So.
Oh, I love that. Okay, what is one of your funniest stories of the Mish?
I looked at you, pulled out your notes, but then didn't actually read it.
Yeah, because I ended up remembering.
Yeah. The one that comes to mind, there's a bunch, but so we were teaching this family, I was on divisions or splits, and we were teaching this family, and I apologize to people that are sensitive about this, but in Argentina, it's not something to be sensitive about, is weight. And so the husbands and wife call each other gorda and gordo all the time, which means fatty. And this one pretty big dude sitting in a chair, and suddenly we're talking about, I don't know why we're talking about Pocahontas, but we were. And suddenly I hear this loud bang, and I see these plastic shards flying everywhere, all over the room. And I look over, and the dad sitting in the room, like he was gone, and I just see the tip of his head behind the table. And we all look up, and all of a sudden everybody starts bursting out laughing because he was sitting in a plastic chair, and it just, all the legs had completely shattered underneath him. And so he just hit the floor, and plastic shards went everywhere. And I just remember everyone laughing pretty hard. It was pretty funny. So
I love the look on a person's face after they've fallen, kind of like that. Like, and there's like always a moment where everyone's silent.
Yes.
And then it's like, as soon as they can confirm that they're okay, then everyone busts out laughing.
Exactly. Yeah. And then his wife was like laughing hysterically, saying, "Oh, what a fatty!" Like, and it was great.
Love it. I am gonna check my notes because the next thing is the crazy story or wild story, if you have one. I know you have a lot.
Yeah, I got a couple. I mean, because that first story, although it's my favorite, is also, I think, wild.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think if I can tell another one that doesn't have to do with getting, like, people pulling guns on me and knives. Oh, okay. I just remembered one. Okay, so we had a couple sisters in my mission, or a particular sister that comes to mind. I love her to death, but she is the most drama queen of all time. Like, every week there was something new with this girl. She was in my district, and she was also in our area that we had split in half, and I hope that doesn't give away who it is, but so she, like, oh boy, like, literally every time we got together, or as, like, a division to do district meeting, there was some new thing that happened. Like, she said there was a weird odor in the church, which brought an even worse one when she left the door open and the church gate open as well. And a stray dog had walked in, and it was bleeding, and like maggots were coming out of its neck. And so we had to clean up, and they were getting into the baptismal font. And so we had to clean it all out, and it was it was horrible. It was disgusting. And getting the dog out was a nightmare because it was growling and angry at us because it was like super defensive because it had been, obviously hurt really bad.
Yeah.
And because in Argentina, there's just animals roaming free everywhere, especially dogs. And so I'm just kind of getting up to that crazier story because it just keeps, it's just like one thing after another after another. It's like that one, and then sometimes like she would ask me things and then I would say, no, you can't do that. And so she'd call the zone leaders, try to get permission from them. If they said no, she would call the mission president. And it was just like, oh brother, every time, like one time she called me and said, hey, I know you have like funds, like emergency funds, like can we use that to take a remise, which is like a taxi home, or I guess an Uber today. And I'm like, no, that's for emergencies only. And she's like, well, this is an emergency, we got to get home on time. And I'm like, just, you can walk or ride a bike. She's like, okay, well, if we get kidnapped, it's your fault. And I'm like, oh my goodness. She's drama queen. And another time she asked the elders, because she said her shower wasn't working. She's like, can I shower outside? Because she stopped asking me questions. So when I was doing splits, I was talking to him, and he's like, yeah, she just calls us now. And she asked if she could shower outside because their shower wasn't working. And I'm like, what did you say? And he's like, no, of course not. She's like, well, send somebody to get it fixed. And then one day in particular, so my mission president had been doing this every morning. He would do a call, and he would merge all of the calls from the entire mission and, down the chain. So it would start with him, zone leader, or assistant zone leaders, and then district leaders, and then they would call everybody in their district. And we would all be on this call, and he would tell us things in the morning on kind of giving us spiritual inspiration, figure out what we can do in that particular day to help us with the work. And this particular morning, a lot of things were going on. So a member, Fernando Gatan, I believe that's his last name, but Fernando, he had just been, it was so crazy. So he was closing his shop, and a bunch of kids had tried to jump him on his way home on his motorcycle, and they tried to rob him. And he's a huge dude, so he beat the crap out of them. But they, beat him up as well, and he fell off his motorcycle. And so he was hurt pretty bad. And we visited him. Well, I called to make sure it was okay with the zone leaders. I said, we'll still do the call, but can we go give him a blessing? On our way over there, we got a phone call I tried to call the sisters, part of my district, to get on the phone call so I could merge and bring them in the call, but they weren't answering their phone. And the day before, or it was either that morning or the night before, they told me that their little CO2 thing kept going off. And she said, I don't know if it's important or if I'm supposed to tell you, but it was really bugging me, and it was really annoying. So I took out the batteries. And I'm like, yes, that is very important that you tell me this. Like, we need to get that fixed right away. And if it's going off, like, that can be very dangerous. I've said, make sure you open all the windows and all the doors. And so I tried calling them to get on this call, and they weren't answering their phone. And I was on my way to give this guy a blessing, and I was like stressing out so much. And me and my companion on the way there, we were talking, and I'm like, Elder, you're going to have to give them mouth to mouth if we get there and they're not, like, if they're passed out. And he's like, no, I don't think I can do that, Elder. And we were just thinking of all these horrible scenarios. But when we finally got over there, because we gave the guy a blessing, luckily he lived from that. And like I said, he's tough as nails. Like, I wasn't worried about him, but I mean, we were a little bit. And when we got there, he was pretty beat up, pretty bad. But I think he even said, you should see the other guys. Getting back because it took a while to get to the hospital, then we went back. And when we finally got to the sister's house, we were knocking and banging, and finally they answered, and they're like, oh, she's like, I'm so sorry. Our phone must have been on silent. I didn't see that. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh no, so
worried. Turns out they were fine. Just another thing to add to the stories. Also, I tell a bunch of, well, I could go on and on with these sisters. There was so many stories, but I'll just end it there with that.
Those darn sisters.
I know. Well, it's mainly just this one. Like, one time we were having a mission, is it called with your mission leader, right? Is that who in the church is called to work with the missionaries?
Oh, the ward mission leader?
Yeah, ward mission leader. So we were having a meeting because we were in the same ward. So the sisters met with him and us at the same time. And this leader, missionary leader, he cracked a joke at the sisters. Mm-hmm. And so she got so upset. It's like, we're ending the meeting. She got on her knees and started saying the prayer. And then she just got up and left. So that's just like, oh my gosh.
That's one way to end a meeting, to start praying.
Yeah.
I should do that at work if a client is talking too much. Just pray with them and then just say, okay, bye, I gotta go.
End it with a prayer.
Just kidding. They'd be confused.
Let's pray. Yeah.
Nice. And then last story is spiritual, one of your spiritual stories.
Okay. Spiritual story. Okay. Yeah. So my absolute favorite one, and the one that was most personal to me, but I don't mind sharing. So I think we're getting together with our mission. I don't know if it was a zone meeting or something, or I could have swore my mission president was there. Yeah, I think he was there, and we had brought investigators or something to be there. I wanted to make sure our investigators had a powerful spiritual experience because I wanted some of them to get baptized. I mean, all of them, obviously. And so at that moment, my mission president, while he was speaking, or somebody was, I'm just trying to remember specifically who it was, but I'm pretty positive it was my mission president, or he had just recently taught us that we were supposed to focus on, because at the time that tsunami had just hit Japan. I believe it was a tsunami or maybe it was a hurricane, but our mission president said now is the time to bring people into the gospel. I mean, and obviously now was always the time, is that, the field is white, all ready to harvest. But particularly he said, with this going on, a lot of people are, thinking, oh my goodness, like this is the end of times, like, because it really is. And we need to, I need to make some changes in my life. And so at that moment, as he was giving his speech to the people, I mean, because I just remember him showing a clip of all the things going on in the world. And then right afterwards, him showing the first vision. And then, it was him speaking to all these people. And in that crowd, I believe we had an investigator, or there was other people. And I remember praying very intently that he would have the Spirit so that he could touch the investigators. And it was at that moment that, as I was praying for him, actually, I mean, I wasn't expecting this, but I felt the Spirit the strongest that I've ever felt in my entire life at that moment. Because I just felt this feeling inside me that I knew for a fact that God lived and he loved me. And so ever since then, I started praying like so intently for other people to carry that Spirit, because that's when I would feel it the most. And I think before that, I would have lots of little feelings throughout my life, but I never felt anything like that. It wasn't until my mission that I gained, I feel like, a strong enough testimony that solidified it and made me, from there on out, say, I can say without a doubt that this is the true church of God, and that God lives, and that he loves us, and that his son came and died for our sins. And yo sé que este es el evangelio verdadero. Yo sé que Dios nos ama. Y estoy tan agradecido por mi familia y mi esposa y todo lo que estoy aprendiendo del Evangelio, porque me da todo lo que tengo. No soy nada sin Dios. Doy todo a Él, por Él ama a todos nosotros. Y estoy tan agradecido por mi misión, porque aprendí muchas cosas que estoy aplicando cada día. Y sé que José Smith restored el Evangelio verdadero, y sé que este es la iglesia verdadera, y amo todas las personas que tuve la oportunidad a enseñar, y aprendí cómo acercar a mi Dios y crecer mi fe y amar a más en mi vida a las personas. Y por eso estoy tan agradecido y amo a Dios y mi vida. Y sé que estas cosas son verdaderas, y en el nombre de Jesucristo, amén.
Amen.